Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is once again that time of the week where we dig underneath the headlines, where we call out the establishment on its BS. It is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution. By the way, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 FM WIDR Kalamazoo or Western Michigan University. So, man, there's a lot to talk about today. If our proviso is to, talk about things that the establishment media does not, it's been a busy week, both in things heard and unheard, seen and unseen, and MLK Day was on Monday, and there's been not just the Intercept article, but I've seen a lot of really good think pieces on the internet that really call out the side of the MLK's legacy that does not get enough mainstream play, or as Cornel West, I think Cornel West called it the Santa Clausification of Martin Luther King. But no, as it turns out, he was actually quite a radical fellow. But anyway, also talk about, we've actually got some guests coming on around 6 o'clock. Talk about National Lawyers Guild and a benefit show that they've got coming up this week. We've got the Democrats are dropping the ball on both our privacy rights and DACA. We've got we've got some really apt commentary from Tulsi Gabbard. We're going to play a little bit later on. And fittingly enough, one of the groups coming on to talk later is Kalamazoo Nonviolent Opponents of War. And she says something that we say a lot on the show, but hey, she's a sitting congresswoman. So I guess with all that material to get into, why don't we just dive into it? So why don't we start with a lot of y'all are listening. Maybe you got the chance to enjoy a day off on Monday. Maybe you didn't. If you're working class Joe or Josephine. Every classroom growing up, everyone memorizes or it's taught the "I have a dream" speech. I have
every February.
And there was
no. Let's be real.
Mm-hmm.
Every February, you learn that black people were slaves.
Mm-hmm.
We got out of slavery. Things weren't right. You maybe heard about Emmett Till if your teacher was kind of woke. You maybe heard about Emmett Till.
I didn't hear about Emmett Till until college.
Oh, right.
I think the general narrative is like...
Wait, you maybe heard about Emmett Till. Yeah. You maybe heard about Black Wall Street if you had a black teacher or something. And then from there, you had Rosa Parks. Your teacher probably gingerly stepped around Malcolm X, and then you talked about Martin Luther King, I Had a Dream, and it's only the end part of it that they talked about. They don't talk about the radical democratic socialism policies that he had in that speech.
And up until Trump got elected and proved unequivocally that this was not the case, part of that narrative was like, and then after MLK, no more racism. Racism, a thing of the past.
Racism's over, guys.
Yeah.
Everything's fine.
If you're a right-leaning conservative type, MLK is your day to remind everyone that Martin Luther King wouldn't want you playing the race card. The color of skin should not matter.
If MLK was alive today, he would
takes a chair to the face.
We shouldn't.
He would. Oh no, my favorite argument on MLK Day that I saw was, Martin Luther King would have been a conservative. I saw that argument so much on Facebook. I'm sitting here.
It's funny. It's so easy. It's so easy to make dead people agree with you.
Right.
It's so easy to make dead people agree with you.
If you don't read.
And to take their words out of context and to reframe their image in a way that supports you. I mean, they've already done it with Jesus.
Oh, man.
So, like, if they've done it with Jesus, you can expect it to happen with Dr. King. And honestly, it's the same on both ends. Well, Jesus would want companies to have a lot of control over their workers. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Jesus would want us to not have abortion.
Right. Jesus says,
Jesus says
food for the poor, but drug test first.
Yeah. Jesus didn't like the gays.
Oh no. Jesus would have said he's gonna heal you, but he needs a copay first. You know what I'm saying? Like that miracle that when he spits on the ground, put the mud in your eyes and tell you to go to the river so you can go see. He's gonna need a couple silver and a couple gold for that. You know what I'm saying?
That loaves and fishes, that comes with a $2 entry fee.
Right.
Oof. So, and one other thing that, before we get into really talking about MLK's politics, and I really do want to launch into that in a big way. Around this time of year, people kind of talk back and forth about, was MLK killed by the government? Or, is that just like a conspiracy theory or something? And the short answer is, yeah, at least legally speaking, MLK, the assassination of Martin Luther King was part of a government conspiracy. And where am I getting this? Am I getting this from Crackpot Times or Russian propaganda? No, this is a New York Times article from 1999, and I'll just read from it real quick. Mr. Jauer's lawyer, Louis Garrison, has said since the trial began that he agreed with 80% of Mr. Pepper's conspiracy theories and disagreed only on the extent of his client's involvement. In his closing argument today, Mr. Garrison repeated what he said through the trial, that his client participated in the conspiracy but did not know it was a plot to kill Dr. King. One juror, David Morphy, said after the trial, "We all thought it was a cut-and-dried case with the evidence that Mr. Pepper brought to us, that there were a lot of people involved, everyone from the CIA, military involvement, and Jowers." So, it is officially on the record that a jury in 1999 said, yeah. By the way, there is a book by the attorney in this case. I believe it's called Killing the Dream, where they actually go into more depth and like the actual minutia of what this meant as far as like the conspiracy to have him assassinated. I'm sorry, Lawrence, you were going to chime in?
I mean, is that really that surprising? The president at the time, LBJ, who passed the Voting Rights Act, who did all these progressive things, in the last year of Martin Luther King's life,
we gave him the war on poverty. What else does this guy want?
He, on record, said, what else does this N-word want? We gave him these token policies that are substantial. They are substantial policies that are part of our democracy today. But that was all that he wanted to do, because he did not in any way, shape, or form wanted to do those things. It's not like LBJ and the other Democrats at the time were progressive, or that they were they fought vehemently for voting rights or poor people's rights or for the average American. Like, no, they only move when the people move them. When the people are involved, and they put their foot on the neck of these politicians to represent them. and Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, John Lewis, and all the other activists at the time proved that. When you get people to move on Washington, when you get people activated and you get people educated, then they move policy. Mm-hmm. And it's not surprising. The CIA had multiple videos and tapes of Martin Luther King they tapped his phone, they tapped X's phone, they were trying to ruin his marriage, they were trying to discredit him in every way, shape, or form, and they labeled him a terrorist to the country.
There's a very good drunk history segment about that.
Seriously, they labeled MLK, who we look at as a national hero now, a terrorist. Same thing with X. Same thing with the other freedom riders. They labeled these people as terrorists.
Yeah, please keep in mind, like, a lot of people do not understand that historical context. You know, people talk about, Colin Kaepernick, and, you have a lot of these white conservatives who are saying, MLK would be ashamed of you. If those same people in the 1960s were... they thought MLK was a hell of a lot more radical than people currently think Colin Kaepernick is. People just do not like the impact that MLK had, especially in the last few years of his life. He was a lot more radical and troublesome to the political establishment than many people are led to believe. And, that's part of that is purposeful. He's been kind of canonized in a way that sanitizes and scrubs away, Martin Luther King's more radical viewpoints and statements. I want to briefly read something. We talk a lot on the show about how there's not really like a mainstream opposition against American imperialism or war. Well, here's a little something that Martin Luther King had to say about war. The business of burning human beings with napalm, of filling our nation's homes with orphans and widows, of injecting poisonous drugs of hate into the veins of people normally humane, of sending men home from dark and bloody battlefields physically handicapped and psychologically deranged, cannot be reconciled with wisdom, justice, and love. A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is facing spiritual death. Yeah, that's why he's the king.
And within his last year, when he started speaking out against the war of Vietnam, that's when they were plotting to kill him. Because remember, during that time, in that speech, in one of his last speeches, I think that he did in New York, over 125 newspapers turned against him. They turned against him, saying that he outlived his usefulness. And that he was damaging the cause of racial justice because he spoke out against America bombing innocent people and destroying innocent lives overseas.
And it's fascinating too that he makes a direct connection between how much resources, not only in personnel, how many young men and women we were sending over to die and to kill ostensibly, and he said he's all these innocent Vietnamese folks, which was extremely controversial at the time, way more controversial than even talking about war is now. You got to keep in mind the big difference between then and now is, the vast majority of Americans are there. They are against the war. They are against our wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, Syria, etc. At the time, the vast majority of the public was still, if not openly supporting Vietnam, at least not opposing it to the extent that Dr. King was, especially not in the context of viewing this kind of internationalist perspective. Most of the polemics against the Vietnam War at the time were less about the damage we were doing to the people of Vietnam than our own casualties, and basically saying like, is it worth the cost of fighting back evil communism that we're going to suffer these kind of losses? But MLK was really telling it like it is, and talked too about how all of those resources, all that money it comes from somewhere, and it comes out of programs that could have been helping poor people here in the United States.
I'm going to have to, I was reading an article not too long ago. I'm going to have to find it and send it off to you guys. But essentially, it was an interesting piece about how war in general is viewed by baby boomers, by Gen Xers, and by millennials. And baby boomers and Gen Xers are more prone to kind of having that idealized, justified war, because they're coming in on the heels, essentially the heels of the greatest generation that fought World War II, a justified war against the Nazis and the Japanese, and then something like 3 to 4 full decades of just romanticization of the Second World War. So war is this glorified thing that we do, and we are justified in it. Takes me to a comedian's quote that it's a bit about going to war, destroying your country, and then coming back 10 years later to make a film about how it made their soldiers sad.
Oh, yeah.
So and all of this, you can kind of feel it in the environment, in the political environment, going after our system of incessant war is a lot easier today than it was in the 1960s, 1970s, because of that kind of cultural shift in the viewpoint of in how war is viewed culturally. I feel that America's just becoming war weary.
Let's take what King talked about back then when it comes to war and talk about, and let's bring it to today. Accurate polling came out recently. Afghanistan is actually is less popular than the Vietnam War now. Mm-hmm. And we're still there. We're in 8 other countries dropping bombs right now. We went from 2 interventions, offensive wars, to 7 interventions, to actually 8 different conflicts that we're doing right now, and we're also escalating tensions with North Korea. Well, how do you think a democratic socialist like MLK, who was anti-war, would feel about our society today? When you have multiple, when one of his favorite quotes that I always like to quote was, he said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Mm-hmm. So you cannot in one breath look at Martin Luther King and say he was only fighting for racial justice, or he was fighting for racial justice, but he was also fighting for poor white people as well. He was also fighting for women's rights as well. He was also fighting for human rights as well. This is a man that when you think of people who are socially conscious or far left, this is a man who said he wanted the United States to give people universal income as a platform that we should be having in this country. So, if you look at the economics behind it, he was right. It would save our country money. People wouldn't be if we did what was it, Seattle? What Seattle did was with homeless people.
With the homeless people.
With the homeless people, that they gave everyone a one room studio, and it was basically like a small hotel room with a studio, but it eliminated homelessness, veterans, people who just got out of prison, people who just came from who just was down on their luck.
I believe the state of Utah has done something similar to that too.
It saves them. It saves the country money. It saves taxpayers money, and it saves these people from not dying on the streets. That's what MLK would have stood for. That's what these offensive wars that our country has been doing for the benefit of multinational corporations. You know good and well he wouldn't have stood for that. Let's not even joke. Like let's not even play. Like this is and also one of the things that he said, which angered a lot of people, especially in this last year. It was in the speech. I think it was in the speech in New York that I'm thinking of. It was one of his last speeches. He said, the problem with progress is the problem with racial progress in this country. I'm paraphrasing. The problem with racial progress in this country is not the overt racism. It's not the overt racist or the judge that won't do his job. It's the moderate white person who agrees with you on policy, but will not stand with you when you need them. That will try to dictate when your justice and your freedom should be acceptable.
Oh yeah,
and you saw that back then with LBJ trying to dictate when he should be acting on the Voting Rights Act and other things. You also see that today with Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and others trying to dictate when should we be fighting for $15 minimum wage, or when we should be fighting for universal health care, or when we should be fighting for universal free college or tuition.
And something I wanted to touch on too is, and this is a really brilliant article. It's on The Intercept, and if y'all want to find it, Martin Luther King Jr. spent the last year of his life detested by the liberal establishment. It's by Zaid Jilani. It's published on January 15th. And I wanted one of the points that he brings up, and this is something that is extremely pertinent to the current state of civil resistance. Particularly, we're talking about Black Lives Matter, or or even other
you got
other groups that engage in civil disobedience.
Yeah.
So a lot of people. So it's like a lot of conservatives be like, that's the right way to do it. That's the right way to do civil disobedience. And I want to just quote real quick from the article. The MLK said he would consider tactics such as school boycotts, blocking plant gates with unemployed African Americans, and mass sit-ins in federal buildings. The New York Times, a steady ally of King's civil disobedience campaign in the South, was furious. 2 days after King's SCLC address, the editorial board called his idea a formula for discord. The paper complained that there's an inherent contradiction in Dr. King's summons to Negroes to act peacefully but forcefully to cripple the operations of an oppressive society. Okay, this is a bunch of bougie white crap, but going on, it's the same kind of frothing cognitive dissonance you'd get from even a centrist liberal outlet or somewhere like Fox News.
I mean, it's almost like change doesn't happen unless there is disruption. It's sort of weird how that sort of is connected. There was all this disruption with the civil rights movement, fighting for things like the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. Lots of disruption made that happen. Lots of disruption made the LGBTQ movement push forward. Lots of disruption is the reason why Black Lives Matter is still on the forefront of social consciousness today. It's almost like
it's like a lot of disruption happening with Occupy Wall Street.
Yeah,
right after the crash. It's almost as if when people get in the streets and actually understand what's going on and knows who's actually controlling the levers of power, and they're actually holding those people accountable.
It's almost like the Arab Spring,
right?
That thing.
It's almost like when people actually rise up and they know and they actually realize who has the levers of power and who's actually screwing them and holding them accountable for it. It's almost like that's when change happens. Like black people wanted to sit on the back of the bus. Like we just wanted to sit on the back of the bus and have our rights infringed upon. It was like, black people just wanted to go to separate lunch counters. We wanted to be divided up in our neighborhoods because of because of the color of our skin or how much money we had in our pocket.
Man, it's almost like blacks want to go to jail because they commit so much crime.
Oh yeah, so much crime. Almost about the same amount as white people. White people, yeah.
But here's the thing, especially in that article, that article in the Intercept is it's a fantastic article. If you haven't read it, please go and read it. Like I said, 125 different news outlets turned on Martin Luther King. They said that that when he started talking about the injustices like the Vietnam War, that he outlived his usefulness. And those same allies that helped fight to get him the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act turned on him. Now, let's put that into nowadays perspective. When Black Lives Matter went and confronted Hillary Clinton, and the memo from the WikiLeaks came out, and the Democratic Party said, "How do you handle Black Lives Matter? You get them you take them into small groups. You listen to what they have to say. Maybe you get celebrities like Killer Mike and Jay-Z and other people to get the black vote out. You do not stand for the policies that they stand for. You do not agree with them." But you listen to them and you give them platitudes and cliches.
Oh yeah, that's straight from the DNC.
That was straight from the DNC email of how you handle Black Lives Matter.
That was leaked through a Russian propaganda.
Russia. Well, I mean, BLM is got taken over by Russia. You didn't hear?
Yeah, right.
Oh no, I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that a decentralized cell structure movement has been completely taken over by Russian agents.
Right.
Okay, follow me here. So, MLK was visited not by the USSR, but by a time-traveling Vladimir Putin who told him to veer far to the left in order to disrupt elections, and also got Chelsea Manning's parents to hook up. Yep. She's a Russian plant as well.
Yeah, all Russian. All these.
Chelsea Manning leaked American secrets to the Russian propaganda network.
Oh wait.
WikiLeaks. It's like, are you?
Wait, hold on, wait,
kidding me?
Wait. Before we even jump on that, because that's something that we do need to talk about. Before we jump on that, that's something we need to talk about. Let's just end it up on this.
Yeah.
When you look at people, and this is something that Killer Mike said, who's a part of Run the Jewels. If you don't know who Killer Mike is as an activist, you need to look him up, and you need to look at the stuff that he says, because he's absolutely brilliant.
Welcome to the House of the Horrors.
Oh man. But he said it during the election, during the
primary.
Not during the primary. It was after the primary.
During the general.
During the general. Because he went on a radio show and he said, and they wouldn't let him talk about Bernie Sanders. The head of the radio station, the media station, sat in the interview and made sure that he did not bring up Bernie Sanders' name during the primary. Now, wait. But he said in a later interview when he was on, because he was on Tavis Smiley's show. So look it up if you do not believe me. He was on Tavis Smiley's show. He said, remember, your vote matters. Your vote means something. So you must demand something when you get these people elected. And that's what that's the main thing, one of the main things MLK was fighting for. Because he wasn't just, one of my favorite quotes that MLK has always said is that when he went to liberate black people, he wasn't just liberating black people from the chains that bind them today. He was also going to the South to liberate the racist white people from the anger in their hearts, because their anger and that deception is why the system is in its current state that it's in. And it's not just, and it's in that system still revolves and regulates and rules over us today. And that system we still have symptoms of it from the new Jim Crow, which is private prisons, the war on drugs. We still have remnants of it today that disproportionately affect not just people of color, but disenfranchised poor people across this country. And that imperialism has also went against the world. And that's what MLK was fighting for in his entirety of his political career. In his lifetime. And that's the legacy that is Santa Claus, because that's not what the mainstream media or powers that be want you to understand.
Yeah, that's right. I think on that, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little. Democrats have been exercising a lot of hypocrisy lately, so we've got a couple things to talk about on that.
Yeah. Steve Bannon is
Look, it's Mueller time.
It's Mueller time.
All that needs to be said is it's Mueller time.
Steve Bannon said that he wasn't going to lawyer up, and you know what he did on Monday?
He lawyered up.
He lawyered up.
Oh, okay. Wow.
It's Mueller time.
It's like the poop bird is going to sing. Okay.
Oh, man.
All right. We'll be right back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, your only source for political revolution.
Hunger is a rather prominent issue amongst the student body of West Germany. The Invisible Need Project is a multifaceted initiative that's aimed to help struggling students. Every 2 weeks, generous people donate their food to the pantry located in the Fawn Student Service buildings or other drop-off locations. All you need to do is grab a reusable bag and grab whatever food you need to help sustain yourself. If anyone's unsure when their next meal will be, or if you have a little extra food you'd be willing to donate, the food pantry is your place. If you're looking to help donate, become a volunteer, or just learn more, call 269-387-4742 or email dosa-inp@wmich.edu for details.
Are you trying to get your local Kalamazoo business name out to the WMU and Greater Kalamazoo communities? Why not do so while supporting Radio Evolution through underwriting and donations? For more information, please visit widrfm.org.
Media that independent.
So actually, we were just wrapping up a quick conversation there about, and I talked a little bit about this with last week, but maybe just like quick hot takes from both of you guys on the whole Steve Bannon money laundering thing.
It's Mueller time.
When the rats are jumping off the ship, that's when you know it's going down. It's going down. The Titan. You know how they said that the Titanic would never sink?
well, the Trump campaign is the Titanic, and the iceberg is Robert Mueller.
Right.
Well, I think like you were saying something really interesting during the break, Luke, about how we've been saying this whole time, like there's impeachable offenses in there, and mostly tied towards money laundering,
towards the financial aspects of being involved as like the top position in the government. You sort of have to be financially clean. That's really ambiguous. when we're talking even in favorable terms about Trump's finances, it's really ambiguous whether or not he's financially clean. There's a point to be made against that about the ambiguousness of it. One of those that kind of, if you don't have anything to hide, man, like, why don't you just show us? But that whole deal, like, the whole deal is that the Mueller investigation was originally put together to look into not just the Russian meddling in the election, but also but mostly the financial ties to Russia. Like, he put together a team of financial lawyers to come after this. So, like, and Donald Trump's been breaking the emoluments clause since day one. Like, one of the greatest tweets that I came across like a year and a half ago was a comparison that Jimmy who sold their peanut farm? Well, that was Jimmy Carter, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Jimmy Carter sold his peanut farm, his privately owned peanut farm, in order to make sure that there was a completely clean break between him and any kind of financial interest that he might have while he's president. Like, that sort of twinges my spidey senses a little bit. The fact that Lawrence was saying that Steve Bannon was going after the like he mentioned Deutsche Bank, they're just going to follow the money and this whole thing sunk. Well, guess what? The Deutsche Bank thing dropped, a week ago? 2 weeks ago?
One more thing on this.
One quick thing.
Yeah.
Two quick things. We already know that the Russians laundered their money through Trump's hotels and real estates. We already know this because it's public record. His sons have already said it. In golf magazines and in other things that are public, that's public record. His son said a lot of our assets come through Russia. The Deutsche Bank has already given Trump over $30 million because Trump would not pay back his loans to American banks, so the only place that he could get it is from Russia. If you're being objective about where he was getting his ties from, because he's not a billionaire, if you want to know where he's getting where his ties are, a lot of this is already public knowledge, on top of the fact that he already admitted that he committed obstruction of justice in a tweet and on the news and on live TV. These are already impeachable offenses. These are already things that if you wanted to get Trump out of office, you could already hit him on.
If the political will was already there, he'd be gone already.
He would be gone already. Here's the thing. A lot of the reasons why a lot of those people wanted to keep him there. The reason why they wanted Trump, still wanted Trump there, was because of the tax bill. They wanted the oligarchs of our country, the rich in our country, wanted to make sure that tax bill got passed. They wanted to make sure that they got their money, they got their investment. After that, they're going to be done with him. You've already seen Republicans in this upcoming election trying to separate themselves from the Trump legacy, from the Trump policy and him as president. It's already happening, man. Like, it's a slow trickle, but it's already happening, man.
So I just got a phone call. It might be from one of the guests, and I did. Let's pivot to the next thing I really want to hit on. So there's this vote that really follows a pattern that has happened time and time again. And we bring this up specifically because, the Democratic establishment, the Nancy Pelosi's, the Chuck Schumer of the world, have been shouting resistance, resistance, resistance since last November. And much like what happened near the end of Obama's presidency, there was an opportunity to really kind of reel in the executive power that Donald Trump has. Well, to quote the title of a popular political book from last year, what happened? Oh, that's so.
Yeah. Democrats, what happened?
I mean,
What happened?
well, here's the thing. Let's put some context on it. Put some respect on it. Put some context on it. The reason why, when President Obama passed this bill that helped further slaughter our Fourth Amendment rights of privacy, besides the Patriot Act and the 10AA Act, which basically said people like Martin Luther King, who was called terrorist by the CIA and others, they could be black bagged and put into black ops sites.
Yeah.
And they could be put into black ops sites without due process, without a trial, basically the Magna Carta part of our Constitution is being absolutely torn to shreds. The NSA, the CIA, the NSA, CIA can use metadata to spy on us, use our phones, use the TVs to listen in on our conversations without actually having a warrant or actually without going through due process. That goes against the Constitution. And that's what our former president that everybody loves signed and had. And they thought that they were going to have Hillary in so they could keep on doing it.
I mean, Guantanamo Bay is still open. It is technically a black site.
Oh my God!
Because it's extrajudicial. I was listening to Kyle Kalinske go in on it a little bit the other night. I'm just like, yeah, Democrats, you slipping up way too much yourselves. On top of the fact that, some of you voted to keep it. Like, what's going on with friggin' establishment Democrats who say that they are part of the resistance against Trump? They're part of the resistance. They have the need to resist and give him more executive surveillance state power. Like, what kind of resistance is that?
Again, and if for people who do not understand, the reason why the Democrats do not fight back against this policy that goes against our constitutional rights that the majority of Americans do not like, the reason why they don't go against it is because our former president was the one who created it. Our former president took the Patriot Act and basically said, throw some D's on it. and we got what we have now. And they wanted to coast into the next election so they could keep on using these policies that goes against our constitutional rights. That is not democratic. That's authoritarian.
Yeah, guys.
That is not liberal. That's not progressive.
Yeah, we haven't really had Fourth Amendment rights since 2001, the passage of the Patriot Act. What's up, NSA? How you doing?
What's up?
Just shout out to you guys. I know you're out there listening. A secondary shout out to my good friends at the FBI. We haven't really had effective Fourth Amendment protections since 2001 of the Patriot Act. There is, I believe, a policy in place that puts an area within America's borders as essentially constitutional rights-free zones. So if you're in this area, you may or may not have rights. It depends on whether or not the state decides to grant you them at any one point. The entirety of Michigan is included in that area, by the way. The entirety of Michigan. Which is absolutely ridiculous.
Here's the other thing the thing that pisses me off about this, and I understand that politically they can't fight back on it because your party, when your party was in power, your party made it worse. Here's the thing: when you realize that that you deregulated Wall Street, that you put in the 95 crime bill, and that crime bill was wrong and was used disproportionately, The Democrats came out years later and said, hey, our bad, we messed up, we should fix this. Yeah. Well, Democrats, we have a president who's a nut job, who's trying to go to war with North Korea, who tweets at 4:15 in the morning.
Did you know he's a very stable genius? He's got the best health. He's the healthiest. Everyone knows it. You know it. He knows it. Everyone knows it. He's the healthiest. Yeah. He's the most stable genius. He's the most stable. Here's the thing. He's the most stable. He's got the best words.
He might be all those things. He might know the best words, and he might know policy so well that your head's gonna spin. Like all those things are.
Oh, and he's definitely not a racist.
Yeah,
you know it. He knows it. She knows it. Okay, they all know it.
Here's the thing.
Not a racist.
He's not a racist, but and then insert racist comment here.
I've never ever heard anyone who is not a racist tell other people that they are not racist.
But insert racist comment here. But here's the thing. Democrats, your job you said is to resist. I understand that your donors are the same donors as the Republican Party and the people who are funding Trump. With that being said, this nutcase is going to destroy the world. Your job is to not let that happen. And you can't be blamed for. You want to know what's one way you can stop the president from actually harming our country more by by deporting people who should not be deported, or using or locking up people who should not be for nonviolent drug offenses, or disproportionately locking up minorities for no reason at all. Your job is to make sure that those things do not stop. Those things stop happening.
Justice Democrats, man.
Oh man,
Justice Democrats. It's in the name. Justice Democrats.
So,
but honestly, I do rolling back just since our host has gone to secure our next guest. Sort of to pull it back to that whole war on drugs kind of thing. Shout outs to California for reviewing and expunging nonviolent drug offenses of people within the California prison system.
Absolutely.
That is the way it needs to happen. Those things need to be expunged, and that stigma needs to die.
There are
not to mention, I'm for maintaining human rights for the people who commit crimes in our country. They committed crimes, that's horrible. There has to be consequences for it, one way or the other. Crime, you can't, I agree with you. I'm not a person who thinks, all crime is good. No, obviously, when crimes are committed, there are consequences through the structures of law. However, the structures of law are rigid and dumb sometimes, and we need to be able to review and go back on some of the stuff we also have to.
Yeah, but we also have to remember that people are being humane. There was a story that Kyle talked about on Secular Talk about an inmate biting off his own finger.
Oh yeah,
and inhumane things that are done to not just inmates, but to just but to low-income, disenfranchised Americans, like the husband, the man that was deported, this 30-year-old. I forgot the guy's name. He was in the news. He got deported for no reason at all. ICE just deported him. And
it's because he didn't have papers. He was brought here illegally when he was 10.
Yeah, I forgot the guy's name. It's a heartbreaking story.
But he's worked and lived in America for 20 years, contributed to the tax base.
He started a family. He started a family and a business.
He was a business owner. The dude is the kind of the example of the kind of immigrant you say you want.
And it's those kind of people that are hurt the most when the Democrats do not resist. When the Democrats do not resist effectively and accurately. When they are not pointing out the fact that, yes, Trump is tied to Trump's policies, and also just for the record, for those who not understand, DACA had polls over 70%. A majority of Republicans wants to see DACA pass.
I mean,
clean up and go home, folks. There's no reason why we should be still fighting about this. Clean up and go home.
One of the big things that everybody is talking about is was also the path, opening up past the citizenship for people who are already here, because the fact is, there are no legal paths to citizenship if you are already here illegally. You have to get booted out, and then you have to save up enough money to come here legally, and then have the paperwork and the money to go through the legal process of getting a citizenship, and all that stuff. There are a bunch of people who are already here who, it's going to cost us way more time and money to track them all down and boot them all out for them to just come back than it is to just accept the people who want to stay.
Here's the thing. To do that, you would actually have to fight on policy and talk about the inaccuracies of our system. And then you have to actually explain the fact that the Democrats are financed by those same people that benefit from locking up immigrants, deporting them, locking up disenfranchised African Americans by not raising the minimum wage. These policies.
Are you telling me that left of center white people don't actually respect human rights? Or what they call left of center? Because that's what it is. That's what it is. When you have Democrats being funded by the private prison industry. No, let me finish. When you have Democrats being funded by the private prison industry that makes a profit off of the exploitation of human labor and human pain, you have a party that does not care about human rights.
I mean, and again, I know people are going to say this. It's why are y'all just beating up on the Democrats? The Republicans are worse. Yes, the Republicans are worse.
And the Republicans are easy.
Here's the thing. Republicans are low-hanging fruit. Republicans are low-hanging fruit. They're the people who... They are the wolves that created the Southern strategy. They're the people who are the type of people who support separate but equal. These are those type of people. That's easy. Remember, folks, 64% of Republicans voted for a pedophile versus when it came to Roy Moore and Doug Jones. Yeah. Republicans, we understand where they stand.
The Republican Party, it's one of those things where when you gather up the Republican Party, and I have Republican friends out there, I want to say I love you guys 100%. I respect you as people. You're great people. We disagree with each other about, policy, a lot of policy things. When you get the Republican establishment and the Republican base together as a group, they're all terrible people. As a group. As a group. You're terrible. You're awful.
Yeah.
It's absolutely astounding to me how you can sit within this group of people who will vote tribally for a person who has credible allegations of sexual assault against minors. You will vote tribally for that person, even just because there's an R next to their name. And this applies to Democrats too, because when you sit them down and you sit down the establishment Democrat candidate and their progressive challenger, and you go, where are, it's like when you look at policy, the polls show that policy-wise the progressives have it, but the Democratic base is just as tribal and just as
easily manipulated
as Republicans are, because they'll just vote for the person who has the D next to their name,
with more name recognition.
Even though, as far as policy platforms go, the progressives are 100% the way you should be going. This happened and is still an argument that, Bernie Sanders didn't win because he's not a Democrat.
What
what I missed, guys. No.
Okay. Okay. Here's the thing. The reason why, and to bring you back in, the reason why for the last 20-30 minutes we are talking about the Democrats resisting, and we need them to actually resist and actually fight for the policies that actually the overwhelming majority of Americans stand for. When they're not doing it, they're helping this administration. When they're not doing it, they're helping this administration. When you're talking about, our president, the temperament of our president, he said naughty words, but you're not talking about the financial dealings the financial corruption that he's a part of. You're not talking about how his policies disenfranchise
my favorites are actually
Americans as a whole. Come on, son.
My favorite is actually the Republicans who come out and say these exact same things. Well, Donald Trump is not a very good president because he said these mean words, and he just has an attitude that isn't becoming of a president.
So no, wait. Are you gonna vote for his policy then?
My buddy out there, Senator Jeff Flake. Yo, you can. Jeff Flake, friend, I gotta tell you, we probably don't agree on a lot. Probably not much at all.
Anything.
Especially when you, we can at least agree that the president has a terrible track record with what he says. We can agree that what he says isn't appropriate for his office. We can agree that he's a disgrace to your party. Why is your voting record why does your voting record in your last session of being a senator, why does your voting record fall within 90% of the Trump administration's agenda? Why do you support you support 90% of Trump, not 100% of Trump, just 90%. Just 90%.
That last
10%.
That's the racist. That's the racist part.
He makes us look bad. It's like
it's not. Well, it's
I got news for you, dude. You've looked bad to a lot of young people for a long time. Not because of what people say.
No, but again, it's not just him. You have people like Joe Manchin. You have people like but you also have people like who's the conservative lady in California?
Oh, Claire McCaskill.
Claire McCaskill. You have Nancy. You have people like Nancy Pelosi who they'll stand and be outraged.
Chuck Schumer.
And they will stand and be outraged. Those are the moderate white people that Martin Luther King talked about.
It just goes back to that whole I will stand here and be outraged over Trump's comments over the weekend about the various fecal state of some countries, and honestly, it's really upsetting to me that was the news cycle for a whole 24 hours, because honestly, it's not news. We already knew that the president was racist. The fact that he displayed it openly in front of in a room full of legislators, doesn't surprise me. He's an idiot. None of this is news. None of this is news. The people who are outraged by his racism are already outraged by his racism. The people who you are trying to reach by being outraged by this racism don't care about his racism.
That's not a bug in the system. That's a feature.
Yeah, they don't care about that, or they don't think it's enough to actually affect their opinion. Probably because they're a little racist, but don't call them that.
I mean, hold on, wait. Just to put some context on it, for folks just to understand. Remember, this is a man who, within his first press conference, said that Mexicans are murderers.
His campaign announcement. His campaign announcement.
That Mexicans are racist.
We're going to build a wall to keep Mexicans out. They're bringing crime. They're bringing drugs, and some, I assume, are good people.
Yeah. Wait. That was years after he said that when Native Americans wanted to open up a casino, that they don't look Indian to him. in a deposition because they didn't want him opening a casino in Las Vegas. Native Americans opened. That was years after Central Park 5, where 4 black young men and a Latino young man was accused
to
of...
roll back the context. I think we've got it.
I think we've got it.
Yeah, it's not surprising. Nobody should be surprised. Nobody should be surprised at Donald Trump's racism. Honestly, the fact that it is what dictates foreign policy, that is what should be concerning.
Right.
Not the fact that he is racist. We already knew that.
And here's the thing. The fact that the Democratic Party will fight Trump on those things, but they will not actually stand and fight for policies that the overwhelming people of our country want is the reason why we talk about the Democrats and we rail against them.
What?
The reason why is because they need to do better.
Well,
they need to do better.
All right, guys.
I gotta go.
Some last points. We got some guests on.
Oh yeah, I gotta dip out.
Final cap. Really, it really does come down to establishment Democrats really only have identity politics. They don't have anything substantive to fight on. They've got to rely on distraction techniques like Russiagate, or they've got to sit here and go, well, you didn't want a woman, so you must be sexist. So
the other caveat that I will end on this is that we talked about it earlier today. Follow the money. The majority of these establishment Democrats, a lot of them are paid by the same donors who do not want the markets to move. They don't want a change in the markets because they get paid by the same people who pay the Republicans. And until we get money out of the system, then none of this is going to change. So that's the one thing that if you are looking for something to do, if you're looking for something that MLK would want you to do, fight for that. Fight to get money out of the system so we can have people who represent us. I'm out.
Well, I think we're gonna take a quick little break. This is the Hoodrat Strategist. We're gonna take a quick little break. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program on that 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo.
WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for radio evolution.
WIDR is proud to be supported by Pedal Bicycle. Pedal Bicycle has 2 locations on 611 West Michigan Ave and 185 Romans Road. More information can be found at pedalbicycle.com.
You are now listening to our weekly RSO Spotlight.
Hi, I'm Alex Felice.
And I'm Kelly Coffee Tabby.
We are proud members of Sigma Kappa sorority.
We live our day-to-day values of loyalty, personal growth, friendship, and service.
We are the main benefactor for the Alzheimer's Association.
If you would like to learn more about Sigma Kappa's involvement in Greek life,
visit our website at wmish.sigmakappa.org
or follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Sigma Kappa WMU.
For more information on this week's RSO, you can visit westernherald.com, YBOT WMU on YouTube, or widerfm.org.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. We talk about local activism, what's going on in the community, and national issues that the mainstream media is not paying enough attention to. We're joined right now with several special guests who are here to talk about a collaborative project that they're working on to basically help support several very important causes, both here and nationally, actually. So why don't we go ahead, let's quickly do introductions, and then we'll go in a little deeper on the groups you represent and, you know, why they're important for, you know, the country and this community in particular. So.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, my name is Harold Boy. The last name is spelled B-E-U. It's German, so EU is Oi in German. I just thought I'd make that clear. And I represent Kalamazoo Nonviolent Opponents of War.
My name is Chris Schlegel. I'm an immigration attorney, and I am the vice chairman of the advisory board for Justice for Our Neighbors.
My name is Aita Wellington. I am the legal assistant for Justice for Our Neighbors here in Kalamazoo.
And we are also joined by a guest over phone. If you would go ahead and please introduce yourself to the folks at home.
Sure. Hi, I'm Denise Heberly. I serve on the board of the Detroit, Michigan chapter of the National Lawyers Guild.
Okay, thank you so much. And I've definitely got a lot to talk about. All of y'all's groups, you're doing such great work, but you know, you're here in the studio to talk about it. So we'll start with you, Harold, kind of go in the same order, and just for those at home who aren't really familiar with your group and what you do, please tell the listeners at home a little bit more about what you do in this community and nationally, if that's the capacity you work at.
Thank you, Andy. Well, KNOW is started in September 1st, 2002. It started because Tom Small asked his wife, I forget her name, but what she wanted to do for birthday, and she wanted to protest the upcoming war in Iraq. So they demonstrated, to make a long story short, they demonstrated in front of the federal building at Michigan and Park, and then they made connections with the Friends who were demonstrating on Tuesday. They were demonstrating against the sanctions against Iraq that happened after the first Gulf War, and because it was killing hundreds of thousands of kids. But anyway, over time it grew, and we've been there every Sunday since September 1st of 2002, including on Christmas and New Year's Eve, including when it was very, very cold. There'd be a braid, so they're protesting. And so I'll just read our mission statement to say what it is. And maybe we can talk about it later, but I don't want to take up too much time for the other folks. So this is who we are, the Kalamazoo Nonviolent Opponents of War. KNOW is a coalition of people and groups committed to nonviolent solutions to human problems, especially to the threats posed by international confrontation and by religious, ethnic, and class conflicts. Formed in the summer of 2002, KNOW arose in the wake of threats from the United States to begin preemptive military action against Iraq. KNOW conveners gathered together individuals and existing peace groups, developed plans for action in support of peace and justice locally, nationally, and internationally. And we believe that's important for people to be active, not passive, to speak up. And we speak up for issues of social and economic justice. And we are promoting this event that's coming up on Friday, January 19th at Shakespeare's on the lower level, Rock for Your Rights. And you're going to speak to this too, right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, but that's in a nutshell what KNOW is.
Okay, great. And now I suppose if we could discuss a little bit further with Is it Ida?
Yes.
Yes. So you work with Justice for Our Neighbors, is that correct?
Yes, Justicia para Nuestros Vecinos. We are located in the First United Methodist Church downtown, and JFON is a national organization that was started in 1999 in Virginia. We have clinics and locations from New York City all the way to Hawaii. So we're hoping one of these days we get to have our conference out in Hawaii, just because we're in Michigan. But we do have 17 states, about 50 clinics, and what we do is we offer legal assistance to immigrants, mostly low income. We also do advocacy and education. We used to, and we still are doing Know Your Rights presentation at the Calhoun County Jail in Battle Creek. We have stopped for just the end of the year. Usually we stop some activities just to reconvene in the beginning of the next year. And in my office, which is downtown, I do a lot of cases of refugee adjustment of status. We do a lot of U visas, victims of domestic violence visas, asylum cases, straight up green card applications. We do a mix of cases that come through, but the uniting thread is that it's low income. We do look at your income to see if you qualify. Since we are a nonprofit, we don't make any money, and most of the time we don't ask you to pay for anything unless there's a fee that we're not able to help you with. In a nutshell, that's JFON. Kalamazoo's clinic was started in 2015. This is our third year coming up, and we also have a sister site, which is in Grand Rapids. And actually, on January 1st, we united all the sites that are in Michigan, so we are now Justice for Our Neighbors, Michigan.
Oh, that's just wonderful, and goodness, we certainly need it. So why don't we go ahead and Denise, National Lawyers Guild. So I've got a great affinity for the work that y'all do. You've actually saved me from a few scrapes in my protest events. But
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. Could you tell the people at home a little bit more about National Lawyers Guild and what role they play in our current political climate?
Sure. I guess what we're most publicly known for is showing up at when invited, showing up at demonstrations to watch the police. That's the only reason we're there, is to keep an eye on the police and make sure they behave themselves, and keep notes if they don't. We also, if there are arrests, we provide jail support, help coordinate that with the organizers of the demonstration. But beyond that, we also do Know Your Rights trainings, and we train other people to be legal observers. Our organization is a bar association, and it originated in 1937 when the American Bar Association was just too conservative and too white male. It was exclusionary. So it's the first bar association that included minority members, and it's had a long and colorful history. It's been called communist. It's been, we're a little better accepted now. But if you go to a protest, or if you see video of one and you see these lime green hats, that's us. So what we also do, though, is provide legal representation, or try to find it for people who are punished for speaking out. And it's all volunteer. Everything is volunteer. We have a volunteer board. People volunteer to go out and do the legal observing, and it's so exciting to actually have to be a potential to be a recipient for fundraising, because we're broke. It does cost a little money to do what we do.
I have to say, NLG, you do some great work on I'm sure the budget isn't nearly enough, but just a personal thanks to somebody who's been out at demonstrations, out in the front lines, and in particular, actually committed some civil disobedience here in Kalamazoo several months ago, and National Lawyers Guild was very quick to contact us and offer aid. So for
what we do, we can even be a little pushy, but we mostly only go where we're invited.
Better that than nothing, that's for sure. So
and today there was a demonstration in Detroit to support DACA. And there were dreamers who occupied Debbie Stabenow's office. All kinds of courage, and there was a very heavy police presence, but they behaved themselves as they usually do in Detroit.
Well, that's definitely true. You watch the Watchmen, and they usually don't act up quite as much. So, very diverse group of, so all three, just make sure. So it is the NLG and, excuse me, Justice for Our Neighbors. Are those the two groups who are going to be recipients of the donation funds coming up this weekend?
Oh, that's what it says on the flyers.
Oh, that's right. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to kind of touch on, the KNOW, helped organize this, and I was curious about, why, what was the decision around which groups to contribute to, and how and I want to kind of ask this of everyone, how do these issues intersect? KNOW calling out war and American imperialism, the incredible work Justice for Our Neighbors does to help protect our at-risk populations who were not born with the same privileges that citizens are. Where do you think that those issues intersect, and what was kind of and I'll guess I asked this specifically of Harold, what was the decision made around which groups to kind of hold this fundraiser for?
Well, Andy, the name does have war in it, and it is true that we do spend a lot of time on issues of war, but as Martin Luther King Jr. said, you can't have peace without justice, and so we do focus on justice issues for all kinds of people. And this decision was made by our board, and Michael Dwyer, who's our coordinator, our paid staff, the only one, created this event, and we feel very strongly for these two groups that we're going to support, and we think that when there's like I said, when there's more justice, then there's a more peaceful society, and if we can get more justice for folk who don't get proper representation legally, or for immigrants or refugees, then our nation suffers. So. But that's basically the thing. I mean, we support like the Palestinian rights. We support DACA, and that's in your wheelhouse, right? Yeah. But we support a number of things, and with the idea of creating a more just society, which will make a more peaceful society. Is that the answer?
Oh, yes. Yeah. And, please jump on, and particularly, talking about, Justice for Our Neighbors. What's kind of the big needs that your group is kind of circulating around, and what is, what are kind of the big concerns that are coming out? I guess I'll go ahead and say, this is on January 19th, and it's a very auspicious anniversary. It's almost a year to the day that Donald Trump was elected into office. And I know that's affected everyone's work, no matter what particular wheelhouse or issue they're working on. So, particularly, I'd be very interested to know, Justice for Our Neighbors, like, how have the events of the past year really changed or intensified the work that you do?
It has changed it tremendously. Just from personal standpoint, because I'm an immigrant. This time last year, when it was real that he was going to be president, I was still a green card holder, and I had this panic in my heart. Oh my gosh, if something happens, I could be sent home and separated from my husband and my son, who are American citizens. So I scrambled and was fortunate enough to be able to file, and then about 8-9 months later, I was able to have my United States citizenship, and while I was working for JFON, which is exciting because a lot of cases that were coming through had the same degree of urgency. They were filing because they were afraid. There were people who just felt like they didn't need to have a U.S. citizenship because they were doing everything that they could do while holding green cards, and all of a sudden they felt the need to become U.S. citizens, to naturalize, because at least it will give you some protection. So JFON actually has had an influx of requests for cases to go through, for representation, and also just help in general. We get a lot of calls. I need to get my green card renewed. What do I need to do? Especially around DACA and the decision that were made. We did receive a lot of calls just in the community, people who wanted to know how they could help us, just because they knew there was a need, and we have a tremendous need for funding, just to be able to help, to be able to offer the hours. I work 3 days a week in the office, so we need more time in the office because we get a lot of calls, but it's a nonprofit. So bring in your pocketbooks, your Visa Pass, your Pay Pass, whatever. But just come in and help us because we do need the money. There's a lot of calls. It has really changed the way we were working before. We used to do a strictly clinic-based type of work where you call us, it goes through a list, and then once a month we will have a clinic where we'll do advice and counsel and then decide if we're going to take a case or not. Now we do get calls that request actual appointments to come into the office and see us and talk to us. And it's all the JFON sites nationwide. They're all going through the same thing. People, they have this urgency to actually get this going, to become legal, because no human being is illegal. You can be undocumented but not illegal. So you can be unlawfully in the country, but you are not illegal. You are legal. That's just my little spiel on it. But yeah, Donald Trump becoming United States president did change the work we do. It did change the sense of safety. That's for me. I remember that after he was elected president, the next morning I just felt unsafe. Like everybody was looking at me, and I was like, "Do you want me to go back home?" Is that why you voted for him? Do you want me to get out of your country? I've been here for 17 years. I'm an American, just like you. I pay my taxes. I work. I do everything that I'm supposed to do. But now you're telling me it's okay to elect a president who doesn't want me in your country. So you believe in what he believes in.
Oh yeah, and I know the day after the election, my roommate, she told me, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to walk down the street, look at white people without wondering, were you one of them? One of them who voted Trump? Let's. I want to make sure. Do you have anything to kind of add or expound on that question before we hand it over to Denise?
I just wanted to say, this is Chris, that the complexities of immigration law are so great that an average person coming here and trying to work through the mountains of paperwork, red tape, and so on that they have to go through to be put into a legal status or maintain a legal status is just overwhelming to so many people. And the best thing for people to do is to seek some kind of legal counsel. And there are a lot of legal aid organizations out there for this. And JFON is one, but there are other ones in the state too. So I would encourage people to do that.
I mean, one thing that I would like to add, just is this little straightforward thing. The green card application, the I-485, used to be 6 pages. In June of last year, it tripled to 18 pages, and it's meant to trip you up. The questionnaire itself, from a layman's perspective, you look at it and you're reeling. Are you serious? Is it meant for somebody who's newly arrived, like for refugees who have been here 1 year? They're meant to go through this whole questionnaire of things that make no sense to the to somebody who doesn't work in law. And so you need somebody to look it over to make sure you're answering these questions properly, because if you hesitate and you turn in that application, it might jeopardize down the line your acceptance, your approval of your case, or anything like that. So lawyers are needed, and we sorely need more help in the community.
So that leads me to another question. I'm going to put a pin in that because I want to make sure to hand it over to Denise and really kind of ask like what this it's year one of this administration, how it's affected your work. But I did have an immigration question I wanted to ask after that. So Denise, if you could tell us a little bit about like how has the work of the National Lawyers Guild been affected by this administration? And I know I've seen y'all out there in a lot of force and numbers that maybe I didn't necessarily see before, but as you specifically, as someone working out of the Detroit office, how has it affected your work on a day-to-day basis?
Well, there's the 5 stages of grief, right? I mean, so I think we've spent a little bit of time in depression because it is a really horrifying situation. This is a march towards fascism. We've seen it before. I'm a kind of old lady, and my grandfather was a sociologist who wrote about Hitler before it all became obvious, and it's as if the playbook has been handed down through the generations, and now, anyway, but not getting too much into that. We are the legal arm of the movement. That's how we identify. And by movement, we mean any effort that's to defeat fascism and to raise the bar for how our people get justice. And it's an enormous piece of work, and we involve ourselves at every level, doing court watches, doing recruiting. I think that we've gotten more energetic once we stop being so depressed. we take turns, and we're ready to support any group, any person who puts themselves in the way of this horrific juggernaut. Even before Trump, we saw an increased militarization of the police. They were getting all kinds of great new toys, and I've been at demonstrations where there's frickin' tanks, and LRAD, which is a make a big noise machine, which can actually break people's eardrums, and short of that, be very disorienting. The methods to break up peaceful protests were already already accelerating, and we don't really see any reason for the current administration to back away from that. Go ahead, I'm sorry. Oh, well, I also just wanted to say about immigration is that it's something, it's a very specialized area of law, and probably by design, very complex, and very paperworky, and you can't just, as a lawyer, jump in and just do it. But there are a lot of groups. I'm hearing myself echo, so I sound funny. That are training attorneys and legal workers to do pieces of it, at least the pieces that don't require the real expertise. And I think that's wonderful. We've all got to pull together. And we're trying, and the Guild is working to be involved in all of those kinds of efforts.
Thank you very much for that answer. I think I'm going to pivot over to Harold, and I wanted to ask. So, being part of KNOW, and I'll speak to Ada and Chris on this too. A lot of people don't really understand, why there's always such an influx of immigration here into the United States. And a lot of that is a result of our own government's foreign policy. And in addition to that, a lot of people don't really understand how difficult it is to immigrate from those very same countries. So I'm thinking, like, maybe Harold, if you could kind of speak to the first part of that question, and then Ada and Chris kind of jump on the second part.
Well, not that I'm an expert on immigration, but I think there's a good part and a bad part. I mean, the bad part is that we have more refugees than any time since World War II. It's a really crisis thing, and it's creating a lot of problems throughout the world, not just in the United States. And the United States has been a beacon in the past for refugees and immigrants. My grandmother, who was Jewish, came over here, and was in Ellis Island. Actually, a little tidbit, if you ever go to Ellis Island, they got a museum, and I learned that 150 million Americans can trace their origins through Ellis Island. Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
And but anyway, so she was undocumented, as were so many others. There's been prejudice in the past, like against the Irish in particular. Just like there is now against Muslims and Mexicans and other.
Well, you can go all the way back. Ben Franklin talking about those damn Germans.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
he
true.
might have been right.
And so that's from the outside, I guess the thing is. Well, I mean, I think we like to think of ourselves as a generous nation, and that we are a beacon of hope in the world. And actually, right now, in terms of Mexico, more Mexicans are going back to Mexico than are coming in. There's actually a negative flow between immigrants and immigrants and immigrants. But I think the main thing is people have rights. People should be treated equally. The Bill of Rights is meant for all people, not just Americans. I mean, it's sort of like if you know about the Ten Commandments, right? Well, actually, Jews have 613 laws. That's what kosher means, 613. But the Ten Commandments was meant for humanity. That was for everybody. The 613 was just for Jews alone. Well, these Bill of Rights, are meant, and the Constitution is meant for all people. And that's been tested in Supreme Court. Sometimes the result is not always that good. Like, for example, what happened to the Japanese during World War II and their internment. That was one of the shameful events in the Supreme Court. In fact, two of the Supreme Court justices regretted making that decision. But anyway, we have been a nation that's a beacon of hope, as I said, and I think people still believe that to some extent, and that's why they come here. Is that the question you're asking, Andy?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think, like, we could spend a lot of time talking about, I feel like a lot of times people don't understand a correlation, particularly look at, South America, a lot of regions in the Middle East where, we've kind of come in and either done some regime changing.
Oh, that part. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I studied political science. I taught history, civics, and so I know a lot about that. A lot about how we created such turmoil in the world. Our foreign policies. I mean, I think, for example, Iran. That is, and it's interesting that the United States gets so upset about Iran trying to get a nuclear weapon, and here we have a nuclear weapon. Israel has a nuclear weapon, and if you look, and this is why North Korea wants a nuclear weapon, no country has had a nuclear weapon, has been invaded. So it makes sense why they would, Gaddafi in Libya eschewed his nuclear weapons, and look what happened to him. Same with Saddam Hussein. So, I'm an abolitionist when it comes to nuclear weapons. I like to get rid of all of them. Yeah. But the thing is, in Iran, I don't think many people realize that we orchestrated the overturn of Mossadegh, who was democratically elected president of Iran in 1953, and then we instituted the Shah, who was a dictator, and he did awful things. And then he was overthrown in 1979. We had the embassy that was our embassy. It was awful. It was terrible. And so it's no accident. I mean, it makes sense that the Iranians would be upset with the United States, not trust us. So that creates a lot of. And then when we did the invasion of Iraq, look, that was like throwing water on a hornet's nest, and we just all hell broke loose, and we're still living with the results. Like ISIS, for example, that's a direct result of the Iraq invasion. So, and then of course the Syrian refugees and all that kind of stuff. And then the other thing, this is something, Andy, that's been coming up. This idea of fake news. It turns out that the dictators around the world, like in Turkey and what were some other places, but they're saying, in Myanmar, but the Rohingya, or how do you say that? Rohingya, yeah. That they're saying there is no Rohingya, and it's all fake news. And these dictators, Erdogan in Turkey, when they're talking about oppressing people and jailing journalists and whatever, academics, he said it's all fake news. So Trump is giving cover to these dictators, and it's an interesting thing. One of the salient factors of a dictatorship, an authoritarian government, is that people's reality is challenged. That we stop agreeing on what's true. What are facts? Like Dan Moynihan used to say, we can all have our own opinions, but you can't disagree with the facts, or, you can't have your facts. Well, now they're challenging the facts, alternative facts, that kind of thing, which is another word for a lie. And so it's getting crazy. There's crazy making, and that's a salient factor of a authoritarian government, and that's a dangerous thing. We need to really capture what is true, know what is true. But anyway, I'm getting off target here. We're talking about immigration, so.
But the connection, I appreciate you bringing up the connection between what the United States has done to implement democracy across the world, and how that has created uninhabitable places for lots and lots of people. And because we're so inviting, people want to come here. And maybe that's going to change. As you said, Mexicans are leaving, and we're just gonna be a bunch of lonely people here in America.
Yeah, maybe that was the secret plan all along. Make it so bad that everybody else leaves. Yeah. So I want to pivot back to kind of a immigration question, bouncing off of that. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about, one, how easy it is to immigrate here legally, and two, why people immigrate to the United States. And I think, both you, Chris, and Ada would have, something really tangible to say from your own personal experience when it comes to that. So, please, if you could kind of speak to that for a bit.
So I think the misconception is that people think it's that those people who are undocumented and have been here for years and years and this without a status, that people think that it's their fault that they aren't documented, that they really could be documented if they wanted to be. But the fact of the matter is that there is not any kind of relief for the vast majority of the 11 million people who are considered to be undocumented. And people really have to understand that there needs to be more visas. There needs to be a form of amnesty. The Dreamers need to be taken care of. They need to have a permanent solution other than DACA, and that their parents in particular, DAPA, which was stalled, also an executive action on the part of President Obama, was basically squashed in the court. So that never went through. Those were the parents of children who were U.S. citizens who are undocumented. So it's just simply a matter of legislation, and yet the Congress has been grappling with this for probably over 20 years, I would say. There's not been any kind of major comprehensive immigration reform since President Clinton. Bush actually had a small measure in around 2000 called the Life Act that helped a lot of people.
Just to talk about how difficult it is, people have this fear that refugees just jump from their war-torn countries and get directly to the United States, but that's not how it works. A lot of times they are in a refugee camp in a different country waiting while they're being vetted to get here. I have a case. They lived in a refugee camp for 20 years. All their children were born on the camp. 20 years. Actually, 1996 is when they left their home country and then went to a different country to wait in a refugee camp so they would get visas to come to the United States or to go to France. And they finally, in 2016, got approved to come to America. All 7 of their children were born in the refugee camp. When I got this case, I read this, I was crying. I was like, I remember this conflict, and they're still stuck. All the children were born in the camp. They're not allowed, a lot of time they're not allowed to work while they're in a refugee camp. The kids' passport do not have the country that they were born in, but their home country. They're waiting. So it's not this thing where, they leave Syria and jump on a plane and come to New York City. They leave Syria, and then they might go to Jordan, and they wait there 2, 3, 4 years, and then from Jordan make their way to the United States. And a lot of times, while they're in those countries, they just have to work these odd jobs because they're waiting to have papers, they're waiting to be approved, and they're also ostracized when they're in those countries because they're refugees. They no longer have a country. So it's difficult for them to integrate that society because they're in transit. And they don't know how long they're going to be in transit. And while they're waiting, their country is being torn apart. And then they come to a new country, have to learn a new language, have to learn a new rules of the country, and then to actually assimilate the culture while they're still in turmoil because they don't have a home anymore. And when you're a refugee and you hold a green card, you can't go to your country. You have to wait till you become a U.S. citizen to actually be allowed out of the U.S. into your country. So even when you come here and you have status and you hold a permanent resident card, you have to wait 5 years as a green card holder to apply for naturalization, get naturalization, and then you'll be allowed to go home. So a lot of time when I give somebody their green card, their first question is, can I go home now? I'd like to see my parents. And I say, no, you can't. You must wait and this X amount of years before you naturalize, and then you'll be allowed to fly into your home country from the United States. So it is difficult to be vetted. It is difficult to obtain papers. It is quasi-impossible these days to even get a visitor's visa from certain parts of the world just because America doesn't want, not America, but the government doesn't want foreigners in the country. I was reading something about how Trump wants the good Africans that are educated and speak English and have money to support themselves to come here. He doesn't want the bad Africans to come, or the bad Haitians, or the bad whatsoever. And I asked this question, what is a bad African? What is a bad immigrant? do you also have a master's degree and you have $250,000 invested in a business? Because I don't think every American that I know is able to boast to the same thing that he's requesting from people just coming in here to better their lives. Immigrants are not criminals. They don't come here to steal anybody's jobs. We come here to work. We come here to go to school. The first thing people do when they get papers is go to university. That's the first thing. Everybody that I know who has papers, the first thing they say is, I can go to college now, and then I can have like a better job, and I can be more Americanized and do more as an American. So it is not that easy to obtain papers or citizenship or permanent residence in the U.S.
No, that's very true, and I mean, thank you for speaking so eloquently to that point. You know, it's, I mean, I knew it was bad. 20 years. Thank you so much for the work you do. I guess pivoting from that, you know, Denise, could you speak a little bit towards, and I know you brought this up briefly just a moment ago. You know, the legal difficulties and challenges that people are met with, particularly in the context of the you know, immigration movement. You know, I've had a lot of comrades out there fighting either for DACA or for undocumented folks. Some people who are undocumented actually committing civil disobedience. And just, you know, from your experience,
that is just the bravest thing I can think of. It's terrifying and it's so brave. And when like today, there were DACA wish they were, you know, I wish they had that protection. People occupying the office of a United States senator, and you know, the struggle, the time, the money, the emotional. How do you, to live your life this way, as we've just heard described, and say, I'm willing to give it up for 20 years to come live in this country. And then what do you get? Yeah. Anyway, did I get close to your question? I might have forgotten.
That's a really important question. You know, I think all of the work that y'all are doing, it really it's holding the line against this just upsurgent wave of hate and xenophobia. And I mean, y'all need a round of applause for doing that work, especially right now. I think there is a better future ahead. You know, you know, as they say, the light at night is darkest just before the dawn.
They also say the light at the end of the tunnel could be a train.
That's true too, but yeah. I want to kind of pivot towards. We've got about 6 minutes left.
Could I say something, Andy?
Oh well, yes.
Yeah.
So actually, kind of like go into kind of last comments, and then we'll wrap it up.
Well, I want to talk about the animus towards immigrants in this country and the prejudice. And you know, when there is a tragedy like in San Francisco, a woman was killed by an immigrant, and you know, he was found not guilty. And it seems, if you read the case, it could very well have been an accident. And the prosecutor went overboard in her charging him with murder and so on. But the point is that I think, what is there, 35,000 murders or more a year in this country? I don't know. A lot of murders.
I don't have the stats on.
Yeah, let's say tens of thousands. And yet, when something like that happens, you know, there's one murder in San Francisco, and it becomes a matter of political fodder for the people that have prejudice against immigrants already. And they say, there, see? And they don't point to all the other kinds of groups that murder people. You know, I mean, 99% of rapists are men. You know, maybe we should point, yep, there goes a man, you know, he's a rapist. And so, you know, it's just really a shame that this prejudice is just really poisoning the well in terms of our political conversation. And it's making things harder, it's creating injustice, and it's making insecurity. and that's a real shame. And so I think it behooves us to be mindful that there, but for the grace of God, we go, that we were all, our families, this ancestry.com that people are getting into, we came from some other place, our families. So we should be identifying with the immigrants and understanding their travails and trying to help them rather than making things more difficult. And then we should stop people who are doing bad things, but that's everybody. That's just not immigrants. Anyway, I got my 2 cents in, so.
I'd like to say a word about temporary protected status. This last year, in 2017, there were 320,000 people in temporary protected status from about 9 different countries. 6 of those countries are under review. 5 have been terminated and will basically end that status in about 18 months for many of them. The biggest group are El Salvadorans. 250,000 people are impacted by that, and they've been here since probably around 2000, 2001. So again, they're not really in a position where there's necessarily relief for them in another form of a visa or a status. So this is another issue that's coming up that's very much like DACA that we need to be aware of and watch.
Oh yes, please, thank you so much. And a lot of the focus is on DACA right now, but there are much bigger immigration issues that our legislators just have not really done a good job of tackling in a humane and progressive way. So,
well, it's never.
I just,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I was just going to say quickly, our policy has never been progressive. It's always been racist, and it's always gone. We give doctors and lawyers from whose skin is the right color priority. And people don't realize that. I mean, I think people think in this country, they think that the immigration laws are fair, and if you just wait your turn, you can get in and not be. I keep hearing my own voice. I'm sorry. The issue of hating the other is one that's been in the whole immigration issue, and that is what's being fed and encouraged, and more fodder on the fire by this current administration. And the fight has turned more blatant, I think.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I think the dog whistle has really turned into a bullhorn.
Yep.
More or less. So Ada, want to make sure you please go ahead and speak. Oh, I will, but just want to make sure you have some time, please. Anything else on this topic you want to leave for the listeners at home?
This is the part where I ask for money every time. So, how do you help JFON, Justice for Our Neighbors, particularly in Kalamazoo? We have a few. We accept all donations, but we have an anthology. It's amazing. It's a collection of poems and letters that were written by immigrants across the U.S. And one of the best part is there are about 40 kids, elementary school age kids that actually wrote letters to their countries, and they're moving. They're just wonderful. It's put together, and we're on our 5th print, and the book only costs $10. I will ship it to you if you buy it, but if you come to the concert on Friday, you can buy it right on site. $10, and you can help JFON. You can have a wonderful book, and also you can send us checks. You can come in and give me cash. You can come help us by being a translator when we have our clinics, because we do need a lot of language assistance, especially Arabic, Urdu, Kiswahili, Kenyan, Rwandan. Those are big languages that we need help with. We do have a lot of help with Spanish, French, some of the most popular languages, but we do get a lot of refugees that come from the Congo that we need help with translation, or Rwanda, or Syria, Iraq, and Arabic-speaking people are needed. So please, if you ever need, if you ask yourself, how do I help with social justice? You can call me.
Sure.
You can call me.
Number?
Yeah, I mean 269-743-2501, and I will say, come here this day. We have a clinic. We need your help, or send me a check. Send the check though. Always, please. We need the money.
All right. Well, let me tell everybody at home about this event this weekend. It's Friday, January 19th, over at Shakespeare's down in the lower level. Rock for Your Rights, sponsored by KNOW, and we've got some great local orgs supporting it. WMU Office of Sustainability, Project X, Students for a Sustainable Earth, Read and Write Kalamazoo. It's a fundraiser for the Detroit chapter of the National Lawyers Guild and Justice for Our Neighbors. It's going to be featuring some really great bands. We've got Vishaps, Quantum Fleek, Mike and Yonga, Sunflower Maze. That's at 7 o'clock. $5 suggested donation. So I know what I'm doing this weekend, and I know everybody likes going out and seeing bands. So, this is a good opportunity to do so for some incredible causes. Again, I want to thank everybody for coming on the show. Harold, Chris, Ada, and Denise, thank you so much. And thank you again, all of you, for all the incredible work that you do.
Thank you, and thanks to Project X for including
take
us.
our picture.
Oh,
this
is an opportunity for my co-host to help out. All right, so all right, Denise, I'm gonna go ahead and hang on up.
The mic and stuff.
And
all right,
you're still on.
All right. So I want to thank everyone for listening. This has been the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. Again, a big thank you to our guests from Kalamazoo Nonviolent Opponents of War, Justice for Our Neighbors, and for Denise from the National Lawyers Guild. Anyway, y'all have a great night, and keep fighting for that revolution solution.